of 4 workshops through the Athenaeum of Philadelphia with our partners Digitizing Philadelphia's Historic Congregational Records Project, and Carol Smith, who's been doing a fantastic job leading this workshop with Walt Rice and a number of other volunteers and staff with the project. We're so glad you're here. If this is your first time taking the workshop, that is okay. You can get caught up, ask questions, and we will make sure that you have access to the previous workshop videos recording so you can watch those also. And as Carol said, if you also want to get a little information, you can go to the philadelphiacongregations.org website and look on there. They have instructions on how to get about transcribing. But this should be a fun day. Walt is going to show us how some things have been digitized and give you a little special trip through our regional digitizing digital imaging center here at the Athenaeum. Let me turn it over to Carol, though. We're so glad you're all here.
And I just want to echo Beth's sentiments. We are delighted that you're here. And I'm delighted to see that a number of you really have started to look at the website and dive into the transcription piece of it. We're trying to make it as easy as possible. So feel free to just play around with it, email with any questions. We try to get back to you as quickly as we can. Today's the behind the scenes tour. How do all of these different things come together? So Walt will start with the scanning process that Mike has been meticulously guiding us through. And we'll see what happens from document to image, ultimately to website. So I'll turn it over to Walt and Mike.
Good morning, everyone. This is a field trip day for me, right? So session 3 is the field trip. I got to come to the Regional Digital Imaging Center at the Athenaeum, and we're going to show you the scanners that we use to digitize the original materials. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the process involved to put all the pieces together. So what you see on the website, how that actually comes together so that you can view the originals. So give me a second. I'm going to turn the camera around, and you should see Mike here with our Bookeye Scanner. And this is the scanner we use to do bound volumes. And what we have on here is a journal from Gloria Day. I'm not sure exactly which financials. I actually think this is receivables and payables, but the pages that are open have dates at 1820. The Bookeye Scanner has a nice V cradle, so the books that can't open all the way have a gentler place to sit while the scan happens. And then it actually scans the 2 sides of this separately so that we have 2 pages. It uses a laser line, and when Mike starts the scan, you'll probably see a red line go across. Just for a second, you saw that red laser line. It measures the height of the pages so that as it processes the images, it knows how to split them on the screen. So hopefully you can see on the screen here, you know, the left page and then the right page of the journal. These files are absolutely huge. So each page that we scan is about 500 megabytes. So yeah, if you see it right there in the corner, it won't let me zoom in, but if you can see it, you've got a 465 megabyte file from just the right page of this. So these files are absolutely huge. The scanning, however, is rather fast. So that was one opening. Change the page. I'll scan left side. It just did the left side this time. Mike's got a message on the screen. But once he starts moving through a volume, it's really quick. So these are files that, once they're scanned on the book scanner, get transferred to the Athenaeum servers for later processing. So he can move through a book pretty quick. Each book, again, we're sensitive to the amount of time they're open and the amount of light they receive. You can see that it's a very short period of time, you know, for that exposure, and certainly less light than many photographic techniques. So normally you would put this on a copy stand, you would light it up with bright lights, and then you'd photograph the pages. But this is certainly a nice, a gentler way to scan an original document. Our next scanner, I'm going to move across the hall here. For things that are bigger than the normal volume, the Athenaeum has what's called a cruise scanner. So this is made by the cruise company in Germany, and it is very big. So that bed that you see in front of you is 4 feet by 6 feet, and the lights raised so they can accommodate a variety of materials. What was on the bed this morning when we came is this 1839 drawing of the Lippincott Mansion in Philadelphia, a famous house by T.U. Walter. This was just donated to the Athenaeum. It's a big deal, but it was sitting here this morning ready to be scanned, so we figured it'd be nice to show you that process. I'm going to set the camera down and adjust a little bit here. This process takes a little longer, actually significantly longer than the book scanner. So we use it mainly for things that are either too fragile for the book scanner or too large for the book scanner. So some of the things you might see on the Philadelphia Congregation site, like the church charters with the seals, or some of the larger documents, those would have been scanned on the cruise. If it was in a frame, it would have been scanned on the cruise. And the cruise software lets us adjust. So if you look above here, you see the lens up top, the lights below. It lets us scan things that are behind glass because the lights actually reflect back away. So right down the center, it's all bright on this screen, but right down the center is a section that doesn't have any reflection because of the way the lights are. So we can handle things in glass, handle things in frames. The way the lens is set up, it will focus on the image itself, even if the frame is raised or it's mounted back. Mike measures before a scan so that we can get a clear image for every document. As this scans, I'll come over and show you the screen here.
We scanned this earlier.
So we did a preview scan earlier, so we would see where it was on the bed, but you can see the color section filling in there as it moves across the document. These scans can take anywhere from 3 minutes to 6 minutes, depending on the resolution and the size of the original. But these files are even bigger than the book scanner, and each scan can be 1.1 gigabytes. So that's a really large file for us to deal with. But it's something that gives us excellent quality to be able to zoom in and really see the details of an original. So a couple other views here so you can see. Again, this moves more slowly through the scanner. It requires some patience.
The light isn't as intense as it looks on the screen.
So, and the other thing here, this light is measured for preservation purposes, and it's about a day of hanging in a gallery exhibition. So that's, again, something that's worthwhile for just about every original. One day, and then it's available in a digital form for reproduction, for printing, and we don't have to pull it out again every time somebody wants to see it. So it really helps preserve the originals by doing this process once, and then being able to access the documents in so many different ways afterwards. Any questions on the scanning process at this time?
Walter, one technical question. What's the native file format that these scanners produce? Are they TIFF files or something like that?
So they are TIFF files, and we scan in uncompressed archival TIFF, and this is really just a standard that exists in this preservation world, because these kinds of files, even if you had some sort of data corruption on an original disk, so say you had a DVD that was difficult to read, if it was a compressed file, one little error makes you lose the whole file, right? The whole image is gone. With an uncompressed TIFF, because each byte of the file is going along pixel by pixel, even if you had some corruption, you can recover most of the image. So it really is, when we're storing these things for long-term preservation, just in case, right? We settle on this uncompressed format, which takes up more space, but should the unthinkable occur and all your copies are corrupted, you know, and the only original you have left is on a damaged DVD, the chances that you can actually recover a lot of that image are good. If it was compressed, you get nothing. If it's a JPEG file or anything your phone produces, Apple's got some fancy ones that take up less space. If a file is corrupt, you get nothing. But in this case, if an original disk or a file is corrupt, we can still recover most of the image. And it's just one more layer of protection, you know, for that preservation. Okay, any other questions about the scanning process at this time? I know that was a whirlwind tour. You saw a Gloria Day volume, and those go real quick. You're looking at a drawing here that's going really slow, but this is the patient world, you know, of archival digitizing.
Well, if there's a question in the chat from Marie Hart. We purchased 2 Bookeye scanners at work 3 years ago, quite an investment. Did CLIR help with the funding for the purchase or the church consortium? Just curious.
So CLIR did. The cruise scanner has been here since 2005 and was upgraded in 2015.
Yes.
So the cruise scanner has been kind of the core technical piece of the Athenaeum's Digital Imaging Center. The Bookeye Scanner was purchased in anticipation of the CLIR grant, and CLIR didn't fund it directly, but the kind of the guaranteed work to the Athenaeum made it financially doable to acquire a Bookeye Scanner to do the work. You're welcome, Marie, I see that one.
And Walt, do you want to address, or maybe you were doing it in the next piece, how we're guaranteeing the preservation of these large format files?
I can address that in the next piece.
Okay, great.
So if you give me a second, I'm going to switch from the mobile iPad here to my laptop, and I'll show some slides. So Tess, if you can turn on the now I'm on my laptop, 1 second. These things are dangerous. 1 second. Okay, should be no feedback now. Can you hear me? Good. So the next piece of this talk that we're doing today is just to show you kind of what the next steps are for how these things come into the website. So I'm going to share my screen. Again, 1 second here. And you should be looking at my slides. There are a couple different pieces that come together to make the website possible. The first of these pieces is the actual metadata for the work. And metadata is just a word that means data about. So if you're talking a book, the data itself is the text of the book, right? The content. Metadata is the information about the book. Its title, its author, the publisher, when it was published, where it's held. You know, that's what we call metadata. And when we're describing these original works, the metadata really is that description of what this is, where it is, who made it, when it was made. And we start with Airtable. So Airtable is like an online spreadsheet, but it lets us work together in this. Let me see if I can make this bigger for you. You can still see my slides here, a little bit bigger this time. Okay. So Airtable really is an online spreadsheet. And what we do as we kind of survey the books before scanning, and then fill it out after they've been scanned. You've got titles. The second column there is creator, the date, and you'll notice some weird formats, but that's how it works. A description, and then subject headings. The other things that go into this table would be unique identifiers, would be the holding congregation, a rights column, which shows you kind of what's permitted, and every one of our works is being released to the public domain. So that's a simple one. It just says public domain. And this really is where the data starts and is gathered. When it is ready, when we've got the images scanned and everything's ready to go, we import this information into Omeca. And Omeca is the software behind the website that you see, that is philadelphiacongregations.org. So all those individual columns, all those individual field names end up here, and you can see title, creator, date. There's the digital identifier, a call number at Christ Church for this one, subject headings, the place, and again, Philadelphia is our place, right? So that's an easy one to fill in. The collection, the format, so the type of original this is, the type of digital file that we have, rights language, it's text, and then some other details. So it comes from Airtable, and then gets imported into Omeca, and that's where you can search and view this information. Next comes the fun part. This metadata then becomes available for us to use in other sites. So Atlas Digital Library is one of the primary public-facing sites for the project, and they're able to read that metadata directly from our philadelphiacongregations.org site. So nobody's rekeying, nobody's doing anything. When we do updates, they can grab a new version, and it's automatically updated on their site. A little bit more work, but we're also using the metadata to pull for OPEN, which is Penn's preservation and access site. And this is where these files will be available, preserved by Penn libraries on their infrastructure, so that even if Atla was to fold up, and I doubt that's going to happen, even if the Athenaeum was to fold up, and I doubt that's going to happen, Penn, kind of the big behemoth institution in Philadelphia that's going to last forever, because that's who they are, is going to have a copy of this, in their digital libraries. So this is something where we've got multiple layers of preservation, and this all comes together because we can kind of shepherd the data from one level to the next through technology tools here. That data exchange happens through a protocol called Open Archives Initiative, and all that data that you saw in columns is now marked up in XML text. So you can see tags here, and these things on the side are called tags. So you see title, creator, subject, and this is just a unified standard, a way to exchange metadata between cataloging systems. So from Omeca to Atla, ultimately perhaps to the Digital Public Library of America. There are other union catalogs of digital records. This is the data that gets exchanged so that everybody knows where to find it and can identify what it is. So this is really what's on the back end of what you see here. Let me look at the chat. I see the subjects indeed are a controlled vocabulary, and we're using FAST, which is an OCLC standard. It takes a lot of the marked subject headings and simplifies them down. So where in a lot of old subject cataloging, if you look in an old book catalog, you'll see lots of double dashes and lots of things split down into geography and split down into different subjects under one head. This really simplifies it so that the main headings are just one item. So pews and pew rights, right? It doesn't say Episcopal Church in the US, pews and pew rights. It doesn't say pews and pew rights historic. It really just simplifies it to one main heading that makes documents findable pretty easily. So that's called FAST, and that's available from OCLC. We don't have a specific plan to put the files in DPLA yet, but we are looking at that possibility, and that's something on the technology side that I've planned so that it's possible. But we may do that, we have to look at what the hub would be. Again, with something like DPLA, you have to aggregate many institutions down to one kind of main catalog. We may go through ATLA for that, because they may be a hub in the future for DPLA. We may go through Temple University as the Pennsylvania hub. So we've got different options there. It's not something we've settled or decided on at this point, but it's something that I've been careful to make sure it was possible. Okay, now the second piece, besides the data about the work, is the images themselves. Those archival images are huge, right? So each page can be 500 megabytes in size. What we do is we compress them to JPEG 2000 images, and that's a modern compression method that gives a higher quality than JPEG, which is a traditional image format, and also allows for what's called tiling, so it can efficiently serve up different resolutions and just pieces of the file online. So as you're zooming through an original and moving around, it's doing kind of something that Google Maps invented, and it's sending just little pieces of that image to your viewer, piece by piece, so that your computer never needs to download the whole thing all at once. And that way, when you're using a viewer, it's quick, responsive, and you can zoom in and out without having to wait. So the JP2 images, the JPEG 2000 images, really allow that kind of tiling and multiple resolution layers to be done efficiently. And they're served via an IIIF compliant server, and we'll talk about what that means. And then you see them on the website in Universal Viewer, which is a free component to do those kind of displays. So when the images are scanned, they are loaded into the PhilaGeoHistory site. And again, it seems weird because geohistory tells me maps, right? But this is the infrastructure the Athenaeum developed for map atlases. So atlases that have 50 or 75 maps in them. And we need to be able to display them at high resolution and let people move page to page and interact with the images. It works really well for scanned manuscript volumes. So this is the infrastructure that the Athenaeum has for this kind of material. Each work, each volume is in a folder. It's got a title and other information. And then each folder, each work, has the image files attached. And so when we're processing these, I load the image files, Carly and Alan go through and make sure everything's in order and everything is there, we're not missing any pages. You see that the scans are just in sequence, from the beginning of the book to the end. But then somebody goes in and marks, that this is the front cover, this is the inside front cover, this is page 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And the originals don't make this easy because sometimes page numbers are wrong, sometimes they're duplicated, sometimes they're missing entirely. Sometimes page 2 is both the left and right side of an opening of the book. And then you open the next, you flip the page, and then page 3 is both left and right sides of the book. And then they change their method halfway through the volume. So this process is one with a little bit of care to make sure that all the pages are numbered and that we have things in the right order. And then once all the data's in place, this is where that IIIF comes, right? International Image Interoperability Framework. And this is what tells the viewer where to find the images. And this is crazy. Don't try to figure it out by looking on the screen here, but just know that this piece here, which is called a manifest, tells the viewer where to find the images. So whether it be on ATLA's website or on our own website, the viewer knows exactly where to find and how to display the images. So one of the things this allows is if somebody does a scholarly project and uses this information, uses a document, in their own exhibition, they can display the images directly in their website, directly in their online paper, by embedding a viewer and connecting to this manifest for whatever work they're using. I see a question about the work title. I guess you mean on this screen here. This metadata is just to guide us. The main metadata that you saw previous is really what displays with the item. These things here, the image title field can be blank because that was mainly used for maps. So if you have a map of a particular area, you would put the title for that image in there, and then the page number goes in the column to the right of it. So you see some things that are here because we also deal with different kinds of materials in this system. But you do have, what you're looking at is a completely filled out record for a Pew Read journal. So all that magic code on the backside leads to this. This is your universal viewer, and every one of those images scanned, converted to JPEG 2000, loaded onto the image server, given page numbers, and made sure that they're in order, show up now in this viewer. And you see on the right side, the metadata that we had from Airtable and Omeca now comes together using that same XML format to display together in one place. So lots of pieces on the back end that all come together to give you something beautiful on the front end and something usable on the front end. And if we do this right, it's extensible. So you use Universal Viewer when you go to our website, but here's a totally different viewer made by a totally different university. And it's displaying one of our documents with one of the transcriptions that our users did for the David Daly diary in a totally different viewer. So it's something where as technology develops and as the components on the front end develop and change, because we build things using standards and following an open workflow on the back end, makes it possible for people to use this resource in different ways in the future. And we can't predict all those different ways. We can't see ahead. But if we're careful in the way we build things, put them together kind of in technology blocks that are standard and make sense, it gives people the opportunity to use them in new ways on the front end. And where we're pushing the limit of this is really with the transcriptions. So none of the viewers really have great support for transcriptions at the moment. So what we're doing is kind of riding right behind the bleeding edge there. So in the Philadelphia Congregations website, you'll see the transcription in a different box, not next to the viewer, because the viewer doesn't support it yet. So we're really kind of working hard to make sure that what we do build will be supported when the time comes. And you can see that in this Tiffy viewer here, where the transcription is in the viewer itself. This is the standard going forward. And this viewer doesn't work for different things for us. But you can see that by building according to a standard, you can get things to work even ahead of their full implementation. So being careful with the way we plan this has really made the project successful in putting the pieces together in a way that works. So again, for transcriptions, right now we can display them, and we're working on the pieces to do the search and to do full text searching within the document itself. So what you see now is just display, but we're working with Atla to make full text search across the documents available both on our site and their site. And then eventually the ability to take you straight to the page where your result is found so that you can read that. And again, the other viewers really is possible because we follow technical standards, and we build this in blocks, in pieces that talk to each other, and components that can be swapped out if necessary, or if somebody's doing a different project, they can use different pieces. Okay, so that's my presentation for kind of what happens in the back end. Remember, you've got 3 pieces here. You've got the metadata, you've got the images, and you've got the transcriptions. And those 3 core pieces of the project kind of follow their own technical paths to get together in the website that you see. But behind the scenes, a lot of this is exchanging, this kind of XML code between the components so that all the systems can stay on the same page. And so that when ATLA's digital library wants an update, they just need to request one, and they'll be given, the XML code that lets them update their copy of the data. So really, we've worked to keep this as open as possible so that others can use it, and so that our partners can use it, and so that the information and the images can be preserved for the long term. That's really part of this goal. It's not just to make it visible, but it's to say we have, maybe a once in a generation, maybe a once in a lifetime opportunity at some of these congregations to really get in and get these things on a scanner, right? It takes money to do this. It takes staffing. It takes cooperation. And we've got all those things that came together at this one amazing time. And this is a unique opportunity. So we get one shot at it, right? And we have to make sure that we do this in a way that will preserve these and make them accessible for years to come. And there are things that genealogists don't have access to. There are things that researchers in general don't have access to. But because of the connections that Carol was able to make, and the archivists, the volunteers at the different congregations who said, this is amazing, and came together to make it happen on their end, we've got this amazing resource. And so it's something that I look forward to seeing years in the future and seeing what people do with it, so that we can have this rich resource on Philadelphia available to everybody.
Well, would you like to mention briefly the bringing in of records that are not being scanned, like the Quaker records, where we could just harvest them?
Say it again, Carol. I missed the beginning of the question.
I wondered if we wanted to tell the folks in this workshop about the exciting opportunity to bring in records that have already been scanned by Ancestry that are coming off of contract.
Mm-hmm. So what we've done with some of the Society of Friends records, for instance, is get the work information from Haverford and Swarthmore, and that comes in looking like a spreadsheet. And I gave them the standards for how we name the files and how things are ordered. And so without having to scan, we've been able to ingest, some 35,000 images, which almost doubles the size of this project without a lot of additional work on our part. So again, just this idea that setting a standard and following a workflow makes it easier to bring in additional partners and to bring in additional content as they become available. So more might be coming off soon from different churches and congregations. And I look forward to adding that as well, because that really can grow our project at a minimum of cost and greatly expand access to resources.
Walter, I don't want to go spinning off into a technical cloud, but I have a question for you that has to do directly with your observation that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity that we have to take advantage of very carefully. I'm aware that things like the TIFF format and JPEG formats are described in very close detail by a bunch of standard settings organizations. And I've read some articles that pose the real risk that 300 years from now, a TIFF that we scan today is going to be off specification and therefore trash. It'll be lost. And I'm also aware that there is software, I think called JSTOR, that will take a look at a TIFF file and say, yes, this is according to the specifications, and therefore is likely to be readable 300 years from now, or it'll say it's off spec, in which case it has to be corrected if we do a good job. Are we doing any kind of verification work like that on our TIFFs and JPEGs to make sure that they're on specification for the long-term usability?
Yes, so the ingest process for OPEN includes a variety of tests for things just like this. So when we give them a hard drive of files, these are so large you can't even send them over the internet. It would take longer than it takes to put it on a hard drive and drive it across town. We give them a hard drive full of images. They run it through a series of scripts that examine each of the files to make sure that they are according to the specification and ready to be preserved. And then they go through their preservation process. So they extract metadata from it, they store other files along with it to make sure that they don't get changed or damaged over time. They've got multiple copies in multiple locations. They really work to make sure that what they have is preserved and preserved accurately in a format that will be accessible many years from now. So that's something where if you look at the OPEN site, there's no flash to it. There's no searching, there's no anything. It's just browsing what look like folders. And this is made in such a simple way that it relies on very little technology to keep it safe. So in whatever form someone in the future comes to it, it's accessible. Whether that browser is 20 years old or 20 years in the future, it will still work.
Thank you.
And just to bank a little bit off of what you said, Walt, and a little bit of your question, Alan, that's somewhat what I do in a sense. Like I export the OPEN export and I review what's there and I see like if it's like on par, and then I put it on a drive and then I bring that drive to Penn once I see that everything is clear and good.
Well, it's very comforting to think that our work is going to be usable 300 years from now. That's a very nice thing to know.
I do look forward to it. And it's something where if you think, the last time that there was any effort to go through all these materials exhaustively, it was probably the WPA who went through these materials back in the 30s. So this really is, once in a lifetime, every 70, 80 years that we get to go through them. And with many of these documents, some of the earliest ones are some of the best preserved, but these things are always at risk and always in danger. So it takes that constant vigilance, both on the part of the congregations and the congregational volunteers, but also on the professional archivists to make sure that these things stay accessible, stay visible, stay preserved.
I'd also like to give a shout out to our technical advisory committee. When we formed this project, CLIR asked us to put together a committee of people that would help guide it. And in that context, we of course have people like Mike Seneca at the Athenaeum, and obviously Walt and all of the project people are a part of it, but also the folks at Penn, at OPEN in particular are there. Will Noel, who's the head of special collections, and Mitch Frass. We have basically digital archivists, Rachel Appel from Temple, Byard Miller from APS, Scott Ziegler, who used to be at APS, and we have historians who've used these records, Christopher Pearl, and Jeff Cooper, who started actually the Congregational Records Project. So every year or so, we touch base with these folks and tell them what we're doing and get guidance as to directions we might be taking it.
So I see the question down there about what the WPA did. That's probably a Carol question, but I know that they went through the records and made indexes and published indexes so that a lot of this was made accessible because they went through and cataloged it.
Right, that's exactly right. They went through and took the original church records. This was a way of creating work for historians during the Great Depression. And you will find these beautifully bound volumes. They obviously had people who had exquisite handwriting and very readable handwriting. And copies of these records I know are at HSP or the Genealogical Society and similar places around the country. So.
Okay. Any other questions for me? We've got the Digital Imaging Center has a client coming in a couple minutes. So I'm gonna step out of my field trip and leave you with Carol for any final questions. But if you have any questions about the scanning or the technology stuff, I have a minute here. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. I know that Carol and Beth have a couple things to mention before the talk is done, but thank you for your time, and we'll touch base another time. Have a great day.
Thanks, Walt. So as Walt mentioned, the WPA project was a bit of indexing, and just Friday, I got a note from one of our volunteer transcribers showing me the original record of a second marriage for Absalom Jones with Eliza Sharp. Now we know, and that took place in 1794, and it was in the minutes or the registers of St. Paul's, which is part of this project. We knew that Absalom Jones had married his first wife, Mary, in 1770 at Christ Church in St. Peter's. They were united at that time. But when I sent this on to Art Sudler, who is the historian at St. Thomas's African Episcopal Church, the church that Absalom Jones founded, he was absolutely delighted because all he had was a copy of the WPA register of that second marriage. So to be able to see the original for him was truly exciting. And it's those types of exciting aha moments that we hope to bring to lots of people. And in that connection, I know that the, let me get this straight here, that Dr. Ann Albert from the Klatt Family Center of Public Programming at the Katz Center for Judaic Studies is trying to put together a group of interested transcribers to do the Mikveh Israel records. And I'm hoping that anyone who is interested in working specifically on Mikveh Israel records might be interested in taking part in that online community. One of our goals with this project is not only to get the records transcribed, but also to give people who are going to be stuck at home still as we make our way through 2020, which seems like it's never ending, and to 2021, an exciting project to work on. So this is part of that. And if anyone has questions, we'd love to take them. We can try to answer your transcription questions as we go through. And I guess the update for Wednesday is we're going to be talking about scholars' use of records and family historians' use of these records as well. We have William Quigley, who is coming in, who wrote the book Pure Heart, and we alluded to that at last week's seminar, and then Libby Brown, who worked on the history of St. Peter's Church and her use of the records. So we're looking forward to that. And let's see. Okay. So we are delighted to have you all with us, and I guess if there are no more questions, you get to leave a little early. It gives you time to go through and look at the website and pick out the records you want to work with before our last session, when we can hopefully answer all your questions for you. And if we can't answer them directly, we promise we'll get back to you. So email us during the week if you have any questions.
And
Thank you for joining us.
Sorry. I was going to say, if anyone wants to, I'm happy to share the OPEN site, just so you can look and see the records and like understand what Walt was saying and how they're very bare bone. So if anyone wants to stick around for that, they can. I'll just do a quick screen share here. You may have looked at it already because I did show you, I did put the link in the chat. But here you'll see the list of congregations, and you'll go down and you'll see the list of items, and you'll see you click on browse, and you'll see it is very bare boned. It has pages listed rather than being able to scan through and page through a document. And this, if you're interested, is the Atlas site, where you can find all the items from the various congregations in the project. And if you click on, say, St. George's, you'll see the items that are in this collection, and you can click on an item and browse that way. And this viewer is a little bit different, much like the website. And you can zoom in and browse through by paging through as well. I thought I would share that just for you all to see. But you can have the floor now, Beth.
Just wanted to thank everybody for participating. There was another question again about where to find the recordings. They will be up by the end of the week at the PhiladelphiaCongregations.org homepage. And I think, Tess, have you been sending them out too? And to remind everyone, if you to register for Wednesday's program if you're not, and if you want to know more about the Athenaeum's Regional Digital Imaging Center, Tess included that link in the chat. So we look forward to seeing you all again on Wednesday. If anyone is still having challenges in figuring out how to get started and work, Carol, do you have a suggestion? Can we do an extra?
I'm just putting in an email address for me, and I'll probably be sending you on to Carly and Alan as well, but contact me and maybe we'll try to set up like a little individual workshop for you to help work you through it. So I'm putting my email in the chat, and hopefully I'm spelling everything correctly, and we look forward to hearing from you. We'll do what we can.
So again, if you need a little bit of individual help, contact C. Smith, that's short for Carol Smith, CSMITH at christchurchphila.org. C. Smith at christchurchphila.org, and Carol will make sure she gets you hooked up with someone who can help you get going. We're so excited all of you are participating and look forward to seeing you on Wednesday.
Thank you all very much.
Yes, thanks. And thanks, Beth, for your hospitality.
And thank you, Tess, for great hosting. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon.
You too.